A Navy SEAL stood alone in the snow, staring at a farmhouse that didn't know it had already lost everything. 1 month earlier, a man had died saving his life. Now, all that remained was a promise, a winter road, and a widow who still believed her husband was coming home. He didn't knock to ask for help. He didn't come to tell the truth. He came because a dying friend asked him to finish one last thing at Christmas. And the woman behind that door had no idea that the stranger standing in the cold was carrying the last breath of the man she loved. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit subscribe so you never miss another tale of loyalty, courage, and heart. Your support truly means the world. Winter pressed down on Michigan's Upper Peninsula like a living thing, heavy with wind and snow, the dark pines bending beneath a sky the color of cold iron. Jack Mercer drove through it in silence. He was 35, broad-shouldered, with the solid, compact build of a man shaped by years of controlled violence and discipline. His dark hair was cut short, regulation clean, though it had grown just enough to brush the collar of his jacket. A rough shadow of stubble traced his angular jaw, emphasizing cheekbones carved by sleepless nights and desert sun. His left shoulder still burned faintly beneath layers of clothing, a reminder that some wounds never truly closed. In the passenger seat sat Rex. The German Shepherd was 7 years old, black and tan, his muzzle beginning to gray just slightly around the eyes. Rex sat upright, alert but calm, the way only a working dog could be. His ears flicked at every sound the wind carried across the frozen road. He trusted Jack completely, not because he had been trained to, but because Jack had earned it, over years of gunfire, darkness, and survival. A month ago, Jack had been on the other side of the world. Operation Silent Ember had taken place in the jagged mountain corridor along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, a region where shadows swallowed men whole, and radios often went silent for reasons no one ever fully explained. Jack's team had executed a clean capture of a mid-level target, the kind of mission that rarely made headlines but quietly altered the balance of something unseen. They were pulling out. That was when the earth opened beneath them. The IED detonated with surgical precision, flipping the lead vehicle and shredding the narrow withdrawal route. Before the echo faded, sniper fire rained down from the ridgeline. Jack remembered the impact before the pain. His body lifted, spun, then slammed hard against rock. Shrapnel tore into his left shoulder. The world narrowed to sound and heat and breath. He would have bled out there. Danny Harper reached him first. Danny was 34, lean and tall, with sandy brown hair usually kept longer than regulation when no one was watching. He had a quiet grin and eyes that noticed things others missed. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, people leaned in. They'd served together for years. Danny knew when Jack was about to move before Jack did. Danny dragged him behind the armored frame of the vehicle, pressed him down, and took the next burst himself. The bullet tore through Danny's lung and clipped an artery. Even then, he didn't scream. He kept pressure on Jack's wound with one hand while his own blood soaked into the dust beneath him. On the medevac ride out, the helicopter shaking violently through mountain wind, Danny's breathing was already shallow. Jack held his hand, his gloves slick with blood, begging him to stay awake. Danny smiled faintly. He spoke about home, about Emily. Emily Harper was 25, Danny's wife of barely a year. Jack had seen her once, briefly, at a unit gathering. She was slender and soft-spoken, with chestnut brown hair usually pulled back in a simple tie and pale skin that flushed easily when embarrassed. There was a gentleness about her that felt almost out of place among men hardened by war. Danny had loved that about her. "She waits," Danny whispered, voice breaking, always leaves the porch light on. He coughed, crimson blooming at his lips. Then he pressed something into Jack's palm. "I need you to finish it," Danny said. "At Christmas. The thing we never miss." Jack nodded, though he didn't yet understand what the thing was. He only knew the weight of the promise and the way Danny's grip tightened once, then loosened forever. Danny died before they reached the field hospital. Jack woke up days later with his shoulder stitched, his body intact, and his soul split open. Survivor's guilt didn't arrive loudly. It settled in quietly, like frost. When Jack could walk again, he asked to see his commander. The commander was a grizzled man in his 50s, face lined by decades of decisions that never left room for regret. He listened without interruption as Jack requested leave, special leave, to personally deliver Danny's remains and belongings to his wife. "I need to do this myself," Jack said. "He saved my life." The commander studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "This is a mission," he said simply. "It ends when you complete it. Go." Now Jack drove through Michigan's winter, carrying an urn carefully secured behind his seat, along with a sealed bag of personal effects. Rex shifted slightly as the road narrowed, trees closing in on both sides like sentinels. Jack thought about Emily. She didn't know yet. As far as she knew, Danny was on another classified assignment, another silence she had learned to live with. Jack had asked the military notification team to wait, just a little. He needed time. He needed to see her first, to understand how to tell someone their world had already ended. The farmhouse appeared suddenly through the snowfall, a single structure at the edge of the forest, weathered but sturdy, with a dim porch light glowing against the white. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. There was life inside. Jack slowed the truck to a stop. Rex let out a soft huff, sensing the change. Jack rested his forehead briefly against the steering wheel. His hands trembled, just once. He thought of Danny's voice in the helicopter, of Christmas, of something unfinished. Then he straightened. Jack opened the door, the cold slicing instantly through his coat. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he stepped forward, Rex falling into place beside him without command. They stood there for a moment, man and dog, framed by falling snow. Then Jack Mercer stepped forward through the falling snow, toward the farmhouse that still believed. It was waiting for a man who would never come home. The porch light revealed Emily Harper only after Jack had already stopped several paces from the gate. She stood framed by the glow, small against the darkness, wrapped in a thick wool coat that reached her knees. Emily was 25, slender, with chestnut-brown hair pulled into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. Her skin was pale from winter, eyes watchful and tired in the way of someone who had learned to listen for sounds others ignored. She did not step closer. In a place like this, distance was a kind of safety. Jack removed his gloves and held them in one hand, a quiet signal of respect. He kept his voice low and even, the tone he used when he needed someone to hear him without feeling cornered. He said he was tracking a criminal operation moving through the forest behind the property. He said the storm was worsening. He asked only for the barn. Then, seeing hesitation tighten her shoulders, he added, steady and plain, "It's just for the night. I won't step inside your house." Rex sat when Jack stopped speaking. The German shepherd's posture was calm, disciplined, his breath clouding softly in the cold. He was large but controlled, black and tan fur dusted with snow, eyes attentive without challenge. Emily noticed that first. The way the dog waited for a cue that never came, the way he trusted the man beside him completely. She shook her head once, an instinctive refusal. A stranger in uniform after dark was still a stranger, but she didn't close the door. Her gaze lingered on Jack's stance, straight-backed, boots planted as if he expected the ground to shift. It was a posture she knew, one her husband had worn when he tried not to worry her before leaving. Emily swallowed. She asked where he would sleep. Jack said the stall closest to the side door, away from the horses, nothing moved or touched without permission. He spoke without embellishment. He did not bargain. After a long moment, she nodded. The barn only. Clear boundaries. Respect for the property. No wandering. Jack agreed immediately. He thanked her once, quietly, as if grateful not only for shelter but for the chance to remain invisible. Emily watched as Jack led Rex toward the barn. She noticed the way he walked, careful of ice, aware of angles, scanning without looking like he was scanning at all. The dog stayed at his left knee, close enough that their shadows merged on the snow. Inside the barn, the air was warmer than outside, heavy with hay and the slow breathing of animals. Jack chose a corner stall and spread clean straw with practiced efficiency. Rex circled once and lay down, facing the open aisle. Jack checked the latch on the side door, not to secure it, but to ensure it wouldn't rattle in the wind. He set his pack down, then sat with his back against the wooden rail, eyes closed, breathing measured. Emily returned to the house and locked the door, then unlocked it again. She set a kettle on the stove without turning the flame on, though the house felt louder than it had minutes earlier, every creak amplified. She moved from window to window, checking the yard. The barn light glowed faintly through the snowfall. She told herself it was only the storm, only a night. In the barn, Jack listened to the wind rise. His shoulder throbbed, the ache deep and dull. Rex shifted closer, pressing his weight against Jack's leg, a quiet question. Jack rested a hand on the dog's neck. The warmth steadied him. He thought of the promise he carried, the one he had not yet named out loud. He thought of the porch light Danny had mentioned, the way Emily must leave it on without thinking, a habit that had outlived its reason. He reminded himself that tonight was not for truth. Tonight was for distance, for patience. Hours passed. Snow tapped the roof in soft bursts. The animals settled. At some point, Jack slept. Emily did not. She sat at the kitchen table, coat still on, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. She listened for footsteps that never came. She remembered a voice saying the same words, years earlier, before a different night and a different goodbye. Just for the night. When dawn began to thin the dark, the barn light was still on. Morning came pale and slow over the Upper Peninsula, the sky a washed gray that promised more snow. Jack woke before the animals stirred. He rose quietly from the straw, brushed hay from his sleeves, and stepped outside to breathe the cold. Rex followed, stretching, his nails clicking softly on the frozen ground. The farm lay still, fences etched in white, the forest standing back like a dark wall that watched without blinking. Jack did not knock on the house. He waited. Respect was a language Emily had already shown she understood. By mid-morning, Emily appeared at the barn door with a thermos. She did not step inside. She set it on a crate, nodded once, and turned back toward the house. Jack thanked her without raising his voice. When she was gone, he poured the coffee into a dented cup and let the heat settle into his hands. Rex watched the tree line, ears forward, patient. Work found them quickly. Jack split logs until his breath came out in steady clouds, each strike measured, careful of his healing shoulder. He shoveled the drift that had swallowed the side path, repaired a sagging fence post with wire and a hammer borrowed from the barn wall, and climbed onto the roof to nail down a loose sheet of tin that rattled in the wind. He did not ask where tools were kept. He learned by watching. Rex moved with purpose. He herded the chickens back toward their coop when a fox shadowed the edge of the field, his low bark enough to send it away. He stood guard while Jack worked overhead, eyes scanning, body angled to block. When the afternoon light thinned, Rex followed Emily's quiet hand signals as she fed the animals, learning her rhythms as if they were part of a drill. Emily kept her distance, but it shortened by inches each day. She left a plate on the crate beside the thermos. Eggs, bread, a slice of apple. She asked Jack how his shoulder was doing. He answered plainly. She asked where he'd learned to fix fences. He shrugged and said, "You learn when you need to." In the evenings, Jack and Rex disappeared into the forest. Emily saw the beam of a headlamp cut once through the trees, then vanish. She did not follow. She had learned long ago that some questions were answered best by patience. She set the porch light on at dusk and left it burning. One afternoon, while Jack tightened wire along the far fence, a pickup rolled to a stop on the road. 2 children jumped out, bundled and laughing, trailing a woman with a scarf pulled high against her cheeks. The woman, Mrs. Klein, a neighbor, was short and sturdy, her hair iron gray and pinned back, her manner brisk but kind. She waved from a distance and asked if the phone might work from the porch. Emily nodded and motioned her up. Rex sat as the children approached, tail sweeping the snow. He let them touch his ears, his chest, his muzzle, calm and solemn, as if this were a duty he took seriously. The children laughed when he leaned gently into their hands. Emily watched, her expression changing, in small, quiet ways. When the truck pulled away and the fence line was quiet again, she stood beside Jack without looking at him and said, almost to the wind, that she used to spend her days with children like that. She told him she had been a kindergarten teacher in a small town south of the lake. She loved the noise, the crayons, the way children believed every morning could be made right if you tried hard enough. When her husband bought the farm, she left the classroom to come north with him. Her family hadn't understood. A soldier's life meant waiting and worry, and the farm was far from everything familiar. Emily said it without bitterness, only fact. She had chosen, and she had not regretted choosing. Jack listened, hands steady on the wire, the words landing where they landed. He did not ask about her family. He did not speak of his own. He felt the promise in his chest grow heavier, as if each shared truth added weight to what he carried. Emily talked about her husband, the way people talk about weather, often, casually, with a certainty that it would return. She mentioned his laugh, the way he left his boots by the door no matter how many times she asked him not to, the nights he came home late and stood on the porch looking at the trees as if memorizing them. She said the silence now was not new. Missions took him away like this. He would come back. He always did. Jack nodded when she paused, the motion small. He understood what it meant to believe that. That night, as snow began again, Jack and Rex moved through the forest beyond the barn. Jack checked the ground where tracks crossed and faded, followed the ridge for a mile, and listened. Nothing pressed close. Nothing answered. He stayed out longer than he needed to, letting the cold sharpen him, letting the waiting feel like something he could manage if he kept moving. Back at the house, Emily set an extra place at the table without thinking, then covered it with a folded towel and left it there. She sat by the window until the light in the barn went out and the dark took the yard whole. Days folded into one another. Jack fixed a broken hinge. He mended a tear in the stall door with scrap wood. He stacked split logs in a way that would shed snow. Rex learned where the ground dipped and where the fence gave, where deer passed at dawn. Emily learned Jack's silences and stopped filling them. One morning she asked Jack about the dog. Jack said Rex was 7, that he had been with him longer than most people. He said Rex liked routine and warmth and doing what he was good at. Emily smiled at that. She said she understood. On the 5th night, the wind rose hard off the lake. The trees groaned. Snow rattled the tin Jack had nailed down, but it held. Emily stood on the porch and watched the barn light, a thin line against the dark. She told herself again that it was just for the night, that strangers came and went, that waiting was something she knew how to do. In the barn, Jack sat, with his back to the rail and Rex at his side. He thought of Christmas approaching, of something unfinished that would not wait forever. He thought of the classroom Emily had left, of the porch light she kept burning, of the words he would have to find when the waiting ended. He stayed where he was. He kept the distance he had promised. And the night passed, as nights do, leaving behind the quiet weight of another morning. The blizzard arrived without ceremony, a wall of white that erased the world by inches. Wind tore across the fields and drove needles of snow into the siding. By dusk, the barn groaned like a living thing, its roof rattling under gusts that came harder with each hour. Jack was outside when it happened. A sheet of tin ripped free along the ridge and slapped back down, screaming. He climbed the ladder despite the wind, one hand braced against the cold metal, the other steadying himself against the ache in his shoulder. Rex paced below, eyes tracking every movement, snow collecting along his back. A gust struck sideways. The loose panel buckled again. Rex leapt forward, barking once, sharp and urgent. He tried to brace the flapping edge with his weight, teeth catching the leather strap Jack had tied to keep it from lifting. The strap snapped. The tin slammed down and clipped Rex's flank. The sound Rex made was small, a low cry swallowed by the storm. Jack was down the ladder in seconds. He dropped to one knee in the snow, hands gentle and quick. Rex's fur was torn, skin scraped raw, but the wound was shallow. Jack pressed a clean cloth from his kit to the cut and spoke softly, steadying both of them. Rex trembled once, then leaned into Jack's chest, trusting him to make it right. Emily heard the cry through the wind. She stood at the kitchen window, heart jumping, and saw Jack crouched in the yard with Rex pressed close. The barn roof shuddered again. Snow drove sideways. She opened the door without putting on her coat. "Inside," she called, the word ripped thin by the wind. Then, louder, clearer, "Bring him inside." Jack hesitated only long enough to read her face. Emily Harper stood framed by the door, hair loose from its braid, cheeks flushed, eyes fixed on Rex with an urgency she could no longer hide. She stepped back to make space and added, firm and careful, "The living room only, by the fire, until this passes." Jack nodded. He lifted Rex, careful of the dog's weight and his own shoulder, and crossed the threshold. The house was warm in a way the barn could never be. Wood smoke and coffee and something sweet, apples maybe, layered the air. Emily's home was spare but lived in, a worn couch facing a stone hearth, a small table with a runner stitched by hand, boots lined neatly by the door. Jack set Rex down on a blanket Emily pulled from a chair. She knelt without thinking, hands steady as she fetched a towel and a bowl of water. Rex lay still, ears flicking, eyes bright. He accepted Emily's touch when she dabbed the wound, gentle and precise. Jack watched her hands, the way she focused, the way worry sharpened her movements into purpose. They ate quietly once Rex settled, bowls balanced on knees, the storm roaring against the windows. Emily spoke first, asking about the injury. Jack told her it was nothing that wouldn't heal. She nodded, trusting him. When the dishes were set aside, Jack knew the moment had arrived. The storm had forced the distance closed. There would be no better night. He stood and retrieved the urn from his pack, along with a canvas bag folded carefully. He placed them on the table between them, his movements deliberate. Emily looked from his hands to his face, confusion rising, then something darker. "My name is Jack Mercer," he said. His voice was steady, but it cost him. "I served with your husband." The room seemed to tilt. Jack told her about the mission, about the mountains, the withdrawal, the explosion that tore the night apart. He did not glorify it. He named the facts and the cost. He told her how Danny had moved first, how he had taken the fire meant for Jack, how he had held on long enough to speak. Emily did not interrupt. She did not cry out. Her face drained of color, eyes fixed on the urn as if it might deny him. Jack opened the bag and laid out the contents one by one. A wedding band, worn thin, a pair of dog tags, edges dulled, a watch with a cracked face that still ticked. A folded letter, sealed. A small Bible, pages marked. He placed each item gently, as if sound itself might break something. "He talked about you," Jack said finally. "About the porch light, about Christmas. He asked me to finish something for him." Emily reached for the ring and stopped halfway, fingers hovering. Her breath caught once, sharp, then went still. When she touched it, her shoulders folded inward as if the weight had finally found its place. There were tears, but they fell quietly, straight down. No sound, no shaking. Only the long, hollow silence of a world rearranging itself without permission. She pressed the ring to her palm and closed her eyes, lips moving without words. Jack slept on the couch that night, boots lined neatly by the door as Emily preferred. Rex lay on the rug before the fire, head up, listening. The storm raged on, but the house held. Emily did not sleep. She sat in the chair by the hearth, the urn in her lap, the bag of belongings at her feet. Firelight flickered across her face, catching on tears that came and went. She traced the edge of the watch with one finger. She unfolded the letter and folded it again without reading. She stared at the door as if expecting it to open. Near dawn, the wind fell back. Snow drifted into stillness. Jack woke to quiet. He did not move at first. He watched the fire's last embers glow and fade, Rex's chest rising and falling, Emily's silhouette unmoving in the chair. The night had done its work. The truth had landed. Nothing else could be done here. He rose softly, wrapped a blanket around Rex's shoulders, and sat back down on the couch, keeping the distance she had asked for. Outside, the world waited under fresh snow. Morning arrived thin and pale, the kind of winter light that felt more like endurance than hope. The storm had passed, leaving the world wrapped in clean white, but inside the farmhouse, nothing felt clean. Emily Harper moved through the house like a shadow that had forgotten its source. She spoke only when necessary. Her voice, once steady and warm, now sounded distant, as if it had to travel far to reach the room she was in. She avoided Jack's eyes, avoided the living room where the fire still carried the memory of last night, avoided the quiet weight of what had been spoken aloud. Jack understood. He did not ask questions. He did not try to soften the truth with words that would mean nothing right now. When Emily told him she wanted to bury Danny's ashes at the edge of the property, near the tree line her husband had loved to walk, Jack nodded once. He wore no uniform that day. Just a dark coat, gloves pulled low, movements careful and restrained. They walked together in silence. Rex followed a few steps behind, limping slightly but alert, his dark coat stark against the snow. The German shepherd, now 8 years old, had slowed with age but not with loyalty. He stayed close to Jack, as if he understood this was not a place for barking or questions. At the clearing, Emily knelt and brushed snow aside with bare hands, ignoring the cold biting into her skin. She was slight, her frame narrow from weeks of eating too little, her dark hair pulled back without care. Jack noticed how her hands shook. Not from the cold, but from the effort of standing upright in a world that had collapsed overnight. Jack lowered the urn into the ground. Emily did not cry. She pressed her palm flat against the earth once the soil was replaced, as if trying to feel something answer back. Her lips moved, forming words Jack did not hear, a private farewell. When it was done, Emily stood and took a step away, then another. "I don't want you in the house anymore," she said quietly, still not looking at him. "I can't see the uniform. I can't hear about war. I just can't." Jack absorbed the words without flinching. "I understand," he said. No argument, no defense. That afternoon, he packed his things and moved beyond the edge of the property, deep enough into the pine stand to be unseen from the house but close enough to watch the lights at night. He set up a small canvas tent, military issue but worn soft with years of use. Rex circled once before settling beside it, nose to the wind. Jack stayed. Not inside, not invited, but present. Each morning, Emily woke to find the firewood stacked neatly by the porch. The barn roof no longer leaked. The fence that had sagged under the snow stood straight again. The path to the well was cleared before dawn. She never saw Jack do these things. They were simply done. At night, Rex patrolled the perimeter, moving quietly, alert to the sounds of foxes and coyotes beyond the trees. Once, Emily glimpsed his silhouette in the moonlight and felt something tighten painfully in her chest, gratitude mixed with anger she did not yet know where to place. Emily's grief settled into her body like winter itself. She skipped meals without noticing, slept in fragments. Sometimes she stood at the window for hours, staring toward the woods, waiting for a figure that would never come home. Other times she folded laundry that did not need folding, hands working automatically while her mind stayed somewhere else entirely. Jack watched from a distance, fighting the instinct to step in, to fix, to protect in ways that would only reopen the wound. He knew this kind of pain. War had taught him that some injuries healed only when left untouched long enough to scar properly. One evening, snow began to fall again, soft, steady, unthreatening. Emily stepped onto the porch without a coat, drawn by the quiet. She noticed the lantern hanging by the barn door had been refilled. The latch that always stuck now moved smoothly. Small things, thoughtful things. She did not thank him, not yet. Jack stood among the trees, unseen. His breath slow, Rex pressed against his leg. He did not expect forgiveness. He did not expect understanding. He had promised to protect, and protection sometimes meant staying silent, invisible, patient. The farm endured. So did they. Winter deepened its hold, but somewhere beneath the snow, the ground waited. And, for the first time since the ashes were laid to rest, Emily slept through the night, briefly, unevenly, but without waking to reach for someone who was no longer there. From his tent, Jack watched the farmhouse lights dim and allowed himself one quiet thought. Distance was not abandonment. It was respect. The night carried a different silence, the kind that pressed instead of soothed. Snow fell lightly, but the air felt watched. Jack moved through the farmyard with Rex at his side, checking the barn latches and the chicken coop out of habit more than need. Routine kept the mind steady. It also caught what others missed. Rex stopped first. The German shepherd lifted his head, ears angling forward, body rigid. Jack followed the line of the dog's gaze and saw it, fresh tire tracks cutting across the snow where no vehicle belonged. The tread was wide, heavy, recent. Farther out, beyond the last stand of pines, a pair of headlights flickered and died. A black SUV sat idle at the tree line, engine dark. Jack's pulse slowed, sharpening instead of spiking. He crouched, brushing snow aside to read the tracks, then glanced back toward the farmhouse. One light burned upstairs. Emily was awake. He eased into the trees, keeping low, Rex ghosting beside him. From the shadowed angle, Jack caught the SUV's rear quarter panel and a faded emblem near the wheel well. An old logistics mark, cheap paint, sloppily covered once and scratched through again. It tugged at memory. Years ago, a task force briefing, a network dismantled but not erased. Jack lifted his phone and snapped 2 photos. Logo, plate partial, a quick zoom on a tattoo visible through a cracked window when one of the men shifted inside. The ink showed a knotwork serpent, unfinished at the tail. He sent the images to a contact he hadn't used in months. Maya Collins, DHS analyst, answered in less than 3 minutes. Her voice came tight and fast. "Jack, that's a remnant cell tied to an old narcotics corridor we burned down years back. They lost money, they lost people. We've seen retaliation patterns, soft targets, remote properties, military families. You're in the profile." "How long?" Jack asked. "Local police can reach you in about an hour if roads hold. DHS air support needs 2. You need to protect the civilian, and hold if you can. Do not pursue." Jack ended the call and exhaled once. He looked back toward the farmhouse. The distance he'd kept these weeks collapsed into a single, urgent line. He moved. Jack circled wide, then slipped beneath the barn where he'd once crawled to brace a beam. There, the old drainage culvert. Concrete mouth half buried by snow, forgotten and narrow, leading under the yard toward the creek. He'd marked it mentally weeks ago. You never stopped seeing exits. He crawled through, breath controlled, Rex following without sound. The culvert opened behind the house, hidden by a drift and dead brush. Jack rose and crossed to the back door, tapping twice, then once. Quiet, specific. Emily opened it with a hunting rifle in hand. She looked thinner than he remembered. Pale, hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp with fear that had already decided to be brave. "What's happening?" she asked. "People watching the property," Jack said. "Bad ones. We need to leave, now. There's a safe route to the river. I'll explain on the move." She nodded once. No questions. She grabbed boots, coat, keys. Jack gestured to the floor. "Rex leads. Stay close to him. Do exactly what he does." They moved back into the culvert, the cold damp biting through layers. Emily's breath shook, but she kept pace, one hand on Rex's harness. Near the creek mouth, light spilled in, then a shout cracked the night. Gunfire tore through the snow. Jack shoved Emily behind a concrete lip. "Go," he said, voice iron. "Rex, lead her out. Go!" Rex hesitated for half a second, then obeyed. He pulled Emily toward the reeds as Jack pivoted back into the culvert, rifle up, senses flaring. He moved into the dark, counting steps, placing shots not to kill, but to delay. Controlled, defensive fire. Snow exploded in sharp bursts. Shadows scattered. He shifted positions, using the culvert's echo to mislead, then broke right toward the equipment shed, drawing attention away from the river. A bullet clipped his shoulder, hot and stunning. He grunted, stayed upright, and kept moving. Sirens wailed, close. Red-blue light cut the trees as two patrol cars skidded into the yard, blocking the main approach. The men in the SUV panicked, braking for the forest, boots crunching hard. The thump of rotors rolled in from the north. A DHS helicopter dropped low over the pines, floodlights pinning the fleeing figures in white glare. Commands barked from loudspeakers. The forest filled with motion. Police advancing, suspects dropping weapons, hands raised. It ended fast after that. Jack sank to one knee, shoulder screaming, snow soaking through his gloves. He forced himself to stay conscious until hands grabbed him, voices steady and practiced. A medic pressed gauze, asked questions. Jack answered enough. By the river, Emily crouched with Rex, arms wrapped tight around the dog's neck. When officers waved them forward, she stood on shaking legs and followed, eyes searching until she found Jack on the stretcher. He looked at her and nodded once. That was enough. Recovery came slowly, measured in inches instead of miles. Jack Mercer woke each morning to the quiet rhythm of machines and the dull ache in his shoulder, a pain that reminded him he was still here. The bullet had passed cleanly enough, but the damage lingered. Doctors spoke in calm, practical tones. Rest. Physical therapy. Time. Emily Harper came every day. At first, she sat in the chair by the window, coat still on, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee gone cold. She did not talk much. Sometimes she didn't talk at all, but she came. That mattered more than words. She was careful around Jack, careful not to lean too close, careful not to touch the bandages unless he asked for help. Her dark hair was usually tied back in a low braid, strands slipping loose by afternoon. Her face still carried grief, but it no longer looked hollow. It looked tired, human. She brought food she cooked herself, simple things. Soup, bread, oatmeal with honey. She said the hospital meals tasted like cardboard. Jack smiled at that, the first real smile he'd managed in weeks. Rex stayed with Emily most days. The German Shepherd lay at her feet in the visiting room, head resting on his paws, eyes tracking Jack's every movement. Emily brushed him each evening, cleaned the healing scrape along his flank, whispered to him the way she once whispered to Danny when he slept too lightly. Rex accepted it all with quiet devotion, as if guarding her was simply the next assignment. Little by little, something in Emily shifted. The anger she had carried, the sharp, burning kind that had nowhere safe to land, began to dull. In its place came questions. Not accusations. Questions. What was Danny like? With the team? She asked one afternoon, eyes fixed on the snowy parking lot outside. Jack told her small things. How Danny whistled off-key when he was nervous. How he never drank the last cup of coffee in the pot. How he talked about the farm as if it were a promise instead of a place. Emily listened. Sometimes she cried quietly. Sometimes she nodded and asked another question. And sometimes she just sat, letting the truth settle where rage had once lived. She began to understand something she had resisted since the knock on her door weeks earlier. That Danny had not chosen to leave her. He had chosen to protect others, including Jack, including her. When Jack was discharged, winter had deepened its grip on the Upper Peninsula. The roads were narrow and hard-packed with ice. The farmhouse stood exactly as it had before, lonely, stubborn, alive. Emily invited Jack back without ceremony. "Christmas is coming," she said simply. "You shouldn't be alone." Jack didn't argue. Rex wagged his tail once, decisive. On Christmas Eve, the snow fell soft and steady, the kind that quieted even the trees. Emily lit the hurricane lantern after dinner, its warm glow filling the room with flickering shadows. She pulled on her coat and scarf and looked at Jack. "Come with me," she said. They walked together toward the edge of the pine forest, boots crunching over snow that glowed faintly under the lantern's light. Rex followed a few steps behind, alert but calm. The old tree stood where it always had, a massive pine with roots thick as buried bones, bark scarred by decades of wind and cold. At its base, half hidden beneath snow and needles, lay the small metal box. Emily knelt first. Her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key, worn smooth from years of handling. She looked at it for a long moment, then at Jack. Jack removed his glove and opened his hand. In his palm lay the second key. Neither of them spoke. Together, they unlocked the box. Inside lay the letter, folded carefully, sealed with familiar handwriting. Emily's breath caught. She opened it with shaking fingers and read by lantern light. Jack did not read over her shoulder. He stepped back, giving her space, giving the moment back to the marriage it belonged to. Emily read the words slowly. Danny's voice lived in them, gentle, teasing, earnest. He wrote about the snow, about the farm, about how he hoped she was warm. He wrote about loving her not in spite of distance, but because it had taught him what mattered. He ended the letter the way he always did. "If I don't make it home this year, remember that I never left you." Emily's knees gave slightly. She pressed the paper to her chest, eyes closed, shoulders rising and falling in silent sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than breath. Then she did what she had done every Christmas before. She held the letter to the flame. The paper curled, blackened, turned to ash. Emily let the ashes fall around the roots of the tree, scattering them with bare fingers despite the cold. Jack watched, heart heavy and steady all at once. He did not step forward. He did not replace Danny. He simply stood witness, ensuring the ritual did not die with the man who had created it. When it was done, Emily straightened slowly. They walked back toward the farmhouse together, snow dusting their shoulders, the lantern swinging between them. At the door, Emily paused. "I don't know what comes next," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "I'm not asking you to." Inside, the fire burned low and warm. Emily opened the door wider, letting the light spill out into the snow. Rex lay down on the porch, head up, watchful, content. Jack set his coat aside and spoke softly, carefully. "I don't need you to love me," he said. "Not now. Maybe not ever. I just want to stay and earn whatever place you're willing to give." Emily did not answer, but she did not close the door. At Christmas, we often wait for miracles that shine bright and change everything at once. But sometimes the truest miracles arrive quietly. They come as warmth in the middle of winter, as strength when grief should have broken us, as a promise kept, even when the one who made it is gone. God does not always remove our pain, but at Christmas, He reminds us that we are never meant to carry it alone. Jack did not replace what Emily lost. He did not take away her sorrow. He simply stayed, and in staying he honored love, sacrifice, and faith. And that is often how God works in our everyday lives, not with thunder, but with steady hands, not by erasing the past, but by lighting the path ahead. If you are watching this during this Christmas season and your heart feels heavy, please remember, even in the coldest night, the light still burns. Even when the door feels closed, God is still near. Thank you for sharing this Christmas moment with us. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need comfort tonight. Leave a comment and tell us where you